Good morning, everyone. And to Linpo Namge, thank you so much. And all the Linpos, Dashos, Excellencies, my UN colleagues, and dear friends. It is very special for me to be back in Bhutan. My first visit here was almost right out of graduate school. So I have seen many changes in this country, and you will understand why I'm was very keen to have the regional launch of our global human development report here in Bhutan. I will take you through a journey that begins in darkness, so you have to please bear with me, but we will walk together towards a light. And I will be making the case that Bhutan, again, as it did a couple of decades ago, in its transformation, will be showing us a new way forward again. So let me start by saying that in this world of uncertainty that we are living in, you see a global population that is burdened by anxieties and worries that we had never really measured at this level before. And many people across the world, interestingly north and south, in all of the surveys done for this global report, do not believe that they will be able to give their children a better life than the one they have lived. And that is saying quite something. That is a dramatic statement. This report argues that human development should seek to expand the richness and the hope of people's lives, not just our economies. Next. This slide to me, sorry, the previous one, please. This slide shows that 90% of countries saw their human development index decrease in 2020 or 2021. Now, this is 4 times as many countries that fell back as they did during the global financial crisis of 2009. Just think about that. This decline is unprecedented in the last decades since we have been measuring human development. Now, it also shows that recovery is very uneven among countries and regions. For our region, in fact, South Asia is the biggest hit. Next. Now, for the first time in 32 years, as you can see, when we have been measuring and calculating human development, the global index has dropped 2 years in a row. This is also unusual. Usually we see a drop, and then you see countries realizing that and picking it up the next year. Not this time. We have now fallen back to 2016 levels of human development, which means most of the gains on SDGs have been reversed in these last, that we've made in these last 5 years. Next. Now, the report argues that even uncertainty, because we're not unfamiliar with uncertainty, but uncertainty has changed. So we are entering a new phase of what is driving uncertainty and worry in our lives. And this means that the future increasingly defies prediction. At least prediction that we have tools currently to understand and do something about it. So what do we need to do to focus on and manage our progress with these new levels of uncertainty? Next. Now just think that in November this year, and I'm talking 2022, the world will reach 8 billion people. 60% who will be living in Asia. So if we're going to address some of the challenges, we have to understand where the big effort has to be going forward. And the report picks up 8 areas where investment is essential and changes in policy and institutions are essential. There are others, but let me just pick some of these and speak to 3 of them to make the point. First, today, just look at poverty. 1 in 10 people live in extreme poverty. Not just below the poverty line. I'm talking extreme poverty. Now, COVID-19, we think, the estimates show that close to 100 million people were added to that poverty group. Look at the area of sanitation. We should think that by now, with all of the science and technology and infrastructure, we could have handled this one. But 1.7 billion people still lack access to basic sanitation. And more than half of this group lives in Asia. And the last one I'm going to pick up is inequality. Both inequality of income and of opportunity. Just ask if 1% of the global population today owns 50% of our assets. We are doing something very, very wrong. And when you ask people, even poor people, what they feel most strongly about, it's interestingly, they don't say being poor. They say it is injustice. And this we have to reflect on, because this is a deep part of the anxiety and stress and that sense of being unsettled that we are seeing around us. I would actually like to add to this, for me, a very key area, but I see it as underlying all of this, is education. Many people ask me, if you had one last dollar, where would you put it? And I always say, in girls' education. Next. Now, we have, as I said, always lived with uncertainty. There has been disease, there have been wars, poverty is not a new phenomenon. But today there are 3 layers that have added to this level or intensified this feeling of being unsettled every day. The first is the extent of destability of planetary pressures. We have so messed up and destroyed our environment that building this back is going to be critical. Now, I have to say that as Bhutan, you have to be proud of having protected your environment, and I hope this is a key part of development progress going forward. The second is there is a tremendous need to move and drive societal transformations. Now, this is not always for the better. So these societal pressures and movements can be both for the good, but also can be very hurtful. So how do we move it more to being the good for all and not just for the few? And related to that, the report picked up across these surveys increasing polarization of views of how we distrust each other and just the anger that the world is feeling right now. Next. So as we lurch from crisis to crisis, we feel like we are firefighters, and without the right tools to firefight, unable to tackle the real roots of these troubles that are bothering us. Next. So this report didn't start this way. It's interesting that it had to shift gear to relate to the responses and feedback that the data and the surveys that were done globally were picking up. So if we were picking up a huge level of stress, for the first time, a Human Development Report really went into a range of issues and indicators that I would even say for us was very new ground, somewhat uncomfortable ground for development agencies, because you don't really have hard data and hard evidence behind it. But we had to take the leap. So it is an unusual report, and I hope all of you do have a chance to keep reading it. It's quite a hefty one, but it's really worth the read. Because you will see that even before the COVID pandemic, 6 in 7 people worldwide were feeling somewhat insecure. And this now has intensified. You can see that the evidence also shows in this slide that stress is linked to inequality. And you see the differences by levels of education. So when, for example, Bhutan says we've got to rethink education and what our children are learning and what our adults are learning, you can see a direct correlation with the societal anxiety and stress that can be eased. And then you can see that insecurity compromises our ability to rise to challenges and be part of the change. And this is mostly among the young generation. So I would say there's no point going through massive reforms if we are not going to be addressing the underlying societal anxieties that people are feeling. Next. Now, this is to me very dramatic, that 1 in 8 people, no matter where you are in the world, suffer today from some form of mental or emotional health disorder and feeling a record level of sadness. Now just think about this, that it is as though the whole world is in a global depression. And if you feel that way, how are we going to be part of a change? We must address this if reforms are to take root, because otherwise, really people just feel no desire or capability to be part of that change. Now women, if I look at, next slide please. Now women, people with lower than tertiary education, and those who are unemployed report much higher levels of absolute worry and stress. So again, you can see the correlations very strongly. Next. Now what we see here is as devastating as what we're doing to our environment. And that is a widespread, growing polarization across countries and regions in the world. And this is very real for us in the Asia Pacific as well. So we're sitting on a tinderbox that can be lit on fire at any time. So we shouldn't be surprised at a war going on in Ukraine. A lot of things pointed to the fact that we are sitting on these volcanic eruptions that can happen at any time. Next. Now look within our own societies. This uncertainty and levels of insecurity are also driving divisions among groups in our own society and affecting our ability to just talk with each other. Usually, even at the height of conflicts around the world, countries, people had spaces for dialogue, and these are shrinking. So this is why also, as Linpo Namge said, one of the key things to keep investing in is those spaces for engagement and dialogue. So I very much like the idea also that we add inclusive as very much a part of the I that we will come to. Because this graph shows, and the numbers behind it, that more and more people want to hold extreme positions. You are either for or against. Very little balance in the middle. Next. So the report then says, if we know some of this now, including all of this that is in front of us, why are we not making some of the key changes that are actually in our control? Let me take an example. We know we have to reduce fossil fuel emissions, yet they rise year on year. We know that tackling inequality is critical to answer a lot of these questions, and yet the gaps keep growing. Next. So this is where we come to navigating and heading towards the light, and what we can do together to help each other, help our countries, and help the world move in this direction. So policies and actions that focus on the right investments, on insurance and innovation, and as Azusa said, let us add here the fourth I, inclusion, will enable us to thrive, to grow, even with carrying a level of uncertainty. For example, the investment into renewable energy and into education brings high returns. We can see that insurance, including social protection, but also universal health care, prepares our societies for pandemics and national disaster calamities. And innovation in many forms, both technological but also cultural, societal, helps us to anticipate better and be ready. Now, I have to say the traditional approaches to public policy, particularly to finance and to education, are still so rooted in the past. And I think here you can see some of the reforms that Bhutan's leadership is trying to move forward with. For institutions that particularly manage these areas do have to change and change very fast. But the area that we are uncomfortable with dealing with, because we don't have economic tools to do this with, is to ease this mental distress and societal anxiety that has built up this psychological worry. And if we cannot address this, what I would call humankind's sense of depression, then none of the reforms, the change, really will make things better for us. So next slide. So this is where things can be addressed if we look at what really drags us down. And it is the power of empowering people, including at very local levels, and connecting people through networks and social movements that are a positive reinforcement to change, so that they feel in control, not just of their lives, but where their countries are headed. We have to understand, therefore, that the old data and the evidence is not enough to change people's minds. We must widen our understanding of human behavior to recognize the roles that emotions play, that cognitive bias and culture plays. So I have been saying to my team, no more standalone reports and studies without understanding the intent that change actions must bring about in very fundamental ways. So now let me turn to our responsibility as the UN and as UNDP. Next. We must double down on human development investments. This means human capital and human security investments as the highest priority. Second, we must help countries accelerate the transition to renewable energy and protecting our biodiversity. Third, some of the old economic models are so broken. It was growth for the sake of growth and only benefited a few. But we do have new economic models and policy options that expand choices and opportunities, including sources of financing that make sense for many more. Fourth, anticipatory governance models, including at subnational levels, will be critical to connect these dots and have more people feel engaged in where their lives and the lives of their countries are headed. And they also must feel that they're global citizens. Bhutan has hardly this is a carbon neutral country. But if every citizen of the world can do what this country has done, so Bhutan for the world is showing that it's not just doing this to save Bhutan, it is doing it to save the world, almost from mankind. And finally, new and extended partnerships with youth, women's networks, social movements, not in the old ways that we partnered, but in addressing this collective anxiety, worry, and sadness, to shift gear and to pivot to a sense of being a stronger feeling of agency and true happiness, which comes from also being more empowered and making your own choices. So last, and let me close by saying that ultimately, with the last slide, next, to navigate uncertainty, we have to look beyond just improving wealth, important as that is. We need to protect our planet and provide people with the tools to feel more secure and regain a sense of control over their lives and their dignity. This is what will give, particularly for our young children, a sense of hope that they are in charge of their futures. It is this that will bring us back on track with human development, and it is true that the best world is indeed still ahead of us, and it is in our hands. Thank you.